can see in real time what other people's reports are. Because it's integrating eBird, you can see it by location, you can see it by species, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really important data. This data is getting integrated, and we've got a huge data set now, and it really is an important winter snapshot that immediately follows our Audubon Christmas bird count. So if anybody wants a fun day or 2 or 3 counting birds, check the Great Backyard Bird Count out. I left some information sheets on the front table.
Great. So Kate's been running this hummingbird banding project starting in Chenega, but doing it in Cordova now since
2015.
So since 2015.
Almost
she's
20 years.
a master bander of hummingbirds, and she's going to talk about her local hummingbird banding and specifically about our Anna's hummingbirds.
We'll talk about Anna's today.
Good.
So yeah, I have a.
And real quick, I think I'll be giving Audubon presentation next month, and I'll be talking about my Antarctic trips.
Penguin picture. Yeah. So this is just a nice color explosion photo that you can play with yourself on. Diane Reese took this picture of Anna, so I took here a couple of years ago. So tonight what I'm going to do is just basically tell you of the history of Annas in America. There are incredible species. And then I'm going to tell you about my research here in Cordova, chasing these guys around. So the Anna's hummingbird, is basically a southwestern bird. And they're a little bit bigger than the rufuses. They're basically green and white. The females are pretty much grayish green, I should say. And then the males will have this full head and gorget throat of a very pink fuchsia color. So Annas are doing a rapid range expansion throughout the United States. They originally, in the 1940s, wouldn't have been found any more farther north than Baja, California. Now, this is pretty interesting, watching these guys in contrast to other hummingbird species, in particular the rufous hummingbird species, which is my main species that I do research on. The rufous hummingbird's population is crashing. They are a species under international concern, and they're just having a hard time. Meanwhile, these guys are exploding. So by the 60s, they were in Oregon and Washington. I think the first, I think it was around 1964 was the first documentation of them in Washington. By the 70s, they were found to be breeding in Arizona, and then they were moving into the rest of the southwest, Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico, and then pushing up into British Columbia and southeast Alaska. By 2019, we were recorded breeding in West Texas. Here's a little bit of population statistics. As I was saying, our populations are exploding. So they are now considered the most common hummingbird on the Pacific Northwest coast, with a population of somewhere around 1.5 million. So estimated the global breeding population is at 5 million, with 96% in the U.S., 13% in Canada, and 15% in Mexico. So we started seeing these guys right around the 70s in Cordova. We started getting some local anecdotes of these birds showing up. And then we had in the isolated slough, is that birds of Prince William Sound, is that right?
Yeah, birds of Prince William Sound.
Yep. He had the first sighting record published there for Prince William Sound. I came to Alaska in '98, and I remember, and I was in Western Prince William Sound in Chenega Bay, and I remember hearing stories of somebody here in Cordova who had a greenhouse, and he was leaving the greenhouse open, and he had a heat lamp in there, and this bird was coming in and out of his greenhouse all winter. He did that for a couple of years. But we didn't get pictures, nobody had any pictures that or at least I didn't see, and of course there was nobody around, there were no other banders in this area except me in 1998. I was the first flamingo bander to come into this area of Alaska. So in 1991, we had the first Cordova Christmas bird count record of Annas. And then we started seeing, the bird people said, okay, now they're accidental into south central Alaska. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Alaska, and I do have some people online who may not be from this area of Alaska, I just put these up so you get an idea of what we're talking about. Western Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula. I have a fellow bander who moved into Alaska. We're going to come up to his work here in a minute, Todd Estelin. So 10 more individuals who started getting reported by sight and photograph recordings in Cordova, Anchorage, Girdwood, and Palmer. This is an immature male that was sighted in 2015, and I think this bird was in Seward. This is the Seward bird, and this is a mature male. And what's interesting is the date. This is May. So I want you to keep that in mind as we move forward into our record. So I moved to Cordova I totally told you the wrong days. I started banding in Chenega in 2006. And I moved to Cordova in 2015 and started the Alaskan Hummingbird Project, my 501c3 research project. So sorry about that inaccurate data earlier. So when I got here in 2015, started getting relationships going. And at that time, I was renting from Kristen Carpenter's old float house, which was at the time owned by Mary Little, which is right on Lake Avenue. That blue float house has the ski bump there, and that's got a great porch. And I was able to catch these two birds on October 21st. And we've got an immature male and an adult female. Now, similar to Rufus's, it's very hard to distinguish an adult female from an immature male unless it's in your hand, because there's more morphological features that you have to check. But just like Rufus females, Anna females can have small scatterings, some a lot, some a little, of gorget feathers on them. And the males, the immature males, usually start getting, off to the side. They'll have one or two on their head, and of course increases like a teenage boy's beard as they get older and they get more testosterone. So in 2018, I captured two more birds, and so I didn't catch any in this in 2017, but I caught two more, and these two were at Diane Reese's, and I believe these are your photographs, Myla. This one, I think, yep, Milo Burchin, 2018. It was funny because I told him I was going over there to catch birds, and he was dawdling, as he sometimes does. I was like, I'm going to catch these birds, I need you here. And I was like, within like a minute of you coming up onto the porch, I had these birds. I said, is your camera ready, dude? I told you. So we had, again, an adult female, Annis, and an immature male. Seeing a trend here? Okay. So you can see he's got just a little bit of baby feathers coming up on his head.
So Kate, were you catching a bunch of Rufuses at the same time?
No.
Or this was okay.
No. So Rufuses take off, and they're gone by August 1st.
Right, okay.
If you see a Rufus around here after August 1st, usually there's something wrong with it. It should be out migrating. They do not stay here in the winter. Okay. We start seeing the Annas in the fall. So September, October, November are really big, especially October, November is when I really start seeing them in the fall. Okay, so this has been a question. Why are we only seeing them in the fall? Where are they in the summer? And where are they coming from? The questions start building. So meanwhile, Todd Eskelin comes to town. Todd Eskelin is the only other masterclass hummingbird bander in South Central Alaska. There's only 3 of us in the state. The third one is Gwen Ballas, who works down in the Tongass with the Forest Service. And Todd works for Fish and Wildlife Service. And he, sometimes his boss lets me go travel and catch hummingbirds, such as what he's doing here. And a lot of times he's doing this on his own as well. He goes to the Kiski and Homer and Sogatna and Seward and catches birds wherever he can. And he catches a lot more birds than I do. And as we're getting into the 2020s, we're getting more and more sightings, more and more birds. So he's, so since 2009, we've had over 40 fall and winter sightings all throughout south central Kenai Peninsula. And then you start getting some summer records. But these are all coming from Todd. He's catching birds at Seward, Homer, Beluga, and even he had a confirmed report in Kodiak. That bird wasn't banded, though, to my knowledge. Well, he didn't go to catch it and band it, so he could have been banded. But no. Okay. So here's some of his data, and he didn't reply to me. I should check to get his 2023 numbers. But you can see he started catching birds on the Kenai in 2018, and so after hatchery male, that's AHY, after hatchery, that's an adult male. We can't tell, once they're an adult bird, we can't tell how old they are. We can only say it's at least a year old, because it takes a year for them to reach maturity and become an adult. So either a bird is a hatchery bird or is an after hatchery bird. Okay, so you can see that he's only have a total of 4 adult males. He's got a ton of young males and a handful of adult females and only 1 hatchery female. Again, looking at this map, so you can see where Soldotna, Kenai, Kiski, Casila, Homer, you guys know where all this is, Seward, one way over here. Chiniga's right there, that's where I used to band, it's right there in Chiniga. Okay, so here's my banding records as of this weekend. So there's the first 2 birds I caught in 2016, didn't catch any birds in 2017. I caught 4 birds in 2018 and 2019, 2 birds each. They're all at Diane's house. And these are all separate individuals. None of these are recaptures. These are all new individuals. Did catch them in 2020, caught 2 hatchery males at my place off of White Shed Road. And then this year was really, really interesting. Okay, so I caught a hatchery male in July at Orca. This was the first Anna's summer banding record that I have in Cordova. And this is really funny. So I've been banding out at Orca the last couple of summers, and my board member, Dr. Marianne Bishop, who is the principal biologist here at the Science Center, and also my my trapping slave. I guess I could say another word, but we're in public. So she loves to catch birds. So we were set up. I had her set up on a trap at one spot. I had 2 other traps on the other side of the lodge, and I'm running back and forth, and she's catching birds, and I'm catching birds. And I see this bird go into one of my passive traps. So it's just like a big net with a small hole, and they go in and they actually get themselves caught inside it. And so I was running up to get it before it could fly back out. And I didn't even get a really good look at it. I just went in and I put my hand on it, and I was like, this bird is squishy, and it's big. And I looked at it and I squealed really loud. I was like, Marianne, they got an And she kept running over. Right? So this is an immature male, Anna's, in July, and then I got the trifecta, when was that? That was this summer. Okay, I'm getting confused. When did I catch this guy? I caught this guy in October. That's right. And it's an adult male Anna's. And what made it unusual was not only was it an adult male, my first catch here at Cordova, but this bird was already banded. And it was banded by Todd in June in Soldotna. And it was the first bird he and I had ever passed between us. So that was pretty cool. I was like, texting him, I was like, does this band number seem familiar to you? And he's like, well, I guess it does. How did you know? And I was like, because it's in my hand. Yeah. This bird is hanging out right above Cordova Air at the Weathered Inn, where our subsistence biologist, Andrew Sanders, is renting. And we affectionately call him Chubbs because he was a very fat 6 grams when I banded him. When I caught him in October, he was already banded by He's still here. Andrew has been away, he just got back the other day, and he hasn't sighted him, but he was still here as of 2 weeks ago. So he made it through all those bad storms, which is pretty darn amazing. Then, in November in 2023, at Diane Reese's out at EF Drive, she's one of my main banding hosts, I caught this beautiful young man. I love the way he matches my fingers, so I planned that. And it was 18 degrees out. This bird, as I walked up onto the porch, I'm setting up the trap, and he's like buzzing around me, you know, watching me. And I hung and walked away, and within 5 minutes, I had him in my hand. There was another bird out there too, but I didn't catch that bird. I got too cold after an hour to leave. It's very cold, hard to sit really still when it's 18 degrees out. Not good. So I came back in December, beginning of December, and I caught this guy, a different immature male. It's a little warmer that day, it was 31 degrees. And then I went out last weekend and recaptured him. He's still there. And I set up a trail camera to see who was coming to the feeder, and I caught these pictures of him, or it could be another bird, because I think there's three, I think there might be 3 birds out there. But what I thought was interesting, I love my new trail camera, is it's 15 degrees and it's barely light out, and this bird is coming to the feeder. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Is there ice in the feeder? Is that what I'm seeing?
She's got a tall heated feeder, and I actually recommend the smaller ones, because what happens here is, so there's a little reservoir right here that you can't see, it's black, and there's a little light bulb, a little night light that sticks up in it. I recommend that you get one of these, you don't have to pick up the little one. And so the stuff in the reservoir remains melted.
Right.
But she had too much syrup in there, and then it freezes. And you don't want that to happen, because when it freezes, it changes the sugar concentration level, and it's kind of like going from beer to vodka, which really isn't good for them. So I came.
Top hat needs a blanket.
So I came back that afternoon to check the feeder, and I changed it out, and I put like half of the syrup in it, so it's only like, it's like barely there. So we shouldn't have that problem. But you have to change your syrup regularly, just like you would in the summertime. So at least once a week, change your syrup, whether you think it's still good or not. So you can barely see, when I re-caught that guy, I did his dot. So you can't see the band on the bird's legs, so I put a dot of water-based whiteout on their heads. It's amazing how long that whiteout actually lasts on it. And he still had just a couple of little specks of it, but I gave him a nice new one. So even though I'm still figuring out the trail camera, but catching hummingbirds on the trail camera is really difficult, because they're so fast, and to get the focus right. But you can just barely tell that his white dot is there. So it's like, yeah, that's him.
You put a white dot in all the ones you get. Because we haven't noticed one in our house, so.
So it could be Chubb's, his dot may have worn off, but it could be another one. So I'll be happy to come and try to catch him. You said your feeder, where you hang your feeder still might be really challenging to set up a.
Well, when the cat can wait for it.
Yeah. So the big question is there a South Central Alaska breeding population? And this picture was taken in 2017 in June by Trey Losi out behind the hospital, and this is an adult male. And Trey watched him singing and displaying, but he said he didn't know whether there was a female around. So it could be, but I've yet to catch annas and immature animals, annas, that's young enough for me to say definitively this bird was born here. So there's 2 ways I can tell that. One is how early in the year I catch the baby, and young hummingbirds, when they're born, their bill is not born fully extended, so it's a small kind of bill. And if you look at it under a microscope or magnifying glasses, it actually looks like it's corrugated. And as they grow, the bill extends and it smooths out. So if I'm looking at a bill and I see corrugations along 80%, 90% of the bill's length, this is definitely a young bird born this year. If I see a bird that's got corrugations of maybe, a third or a fourth of the way, I can say, yes, this is a hatchier bird, but I'm not entirely sure where that bird originated from.
Did you get one on July 2nd? Which me a bird on July 2nd? Yeah.
That was, what was it? Well, it was the passing. The pass now, Becca, yeah, July 2nd, that's the guy.
So if they, and the other record is an adult on May 7th, which is later than, well, that's actually. So this
Because
is-
Anna's on getting that, so Anna's are sneaky. Okay, so where were we? All right. Okay. So we're catching mostly immature males with adult females early fall winter. Where are these birds coming from? And we're continuing to get reports of these wintering birds all over South Zone. So I just wanted to show you a couple graphics right now of how this population is exploding. So this shows Anna's hummingbirds on Christmas bird counts in Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. And you can see how in 2000, they just exploded, the numbers. And then here is sightings in Alaska on Christmas bird counts. Right around 2010 seems to be the time that they really started to get these birds.
Kate, is there a time when the rufous population started to decline?
Within the last 25 years, 25, yeah.
So is there any correlation between the increase
No.
in Annas and the, okay.
We're not exactly sure why. Rufuses were thought to be super adaptable, but they're also super susceptible to climate change, severe weather, fire events, pesticides. Okay? Annas have some strategies that actually may help them avoid some of these issues. It's not. Okay. So we have no confirmed breeding records. Where are these birds coming from? Oh, did I miss something? Maybe I missed something. We're going to come back to that. So one of the reasons that they can, one of the strategies that they have for survival is they're super, super cold tolerant. Rufuses are cold tolerant. The Annas make rufuses look like Floridians. Right? So these guys can really do some amazing things. Let me just see statistics here. So when they enter torpor, they lower the body temperature from about 107 degrees to about 48 degrees. Okay? And then their heart rate goes from around 400 to 500 beats per minute to while at rest, when they're at rest, 400 to 500 beats per minute. And when they're active, 1,260 beats per minute when in flight. So at night, that heartbeat plummets to as low as 50 beats a minute. And their respiration also slows dramatically. They can lower the metabolic rate by 95%. So that's one way that they're being super successful. Okay. So while we're trying to figure out where are these birds coming from, how are they being successful, one of the places that has really been very critical in Anna's research and their tolerance and their range expansion has been these guys at the Intermountain Bird Observatory at Boise State University. And they put out this great poster, I think this was around 2018 or 2019 when they started this study. And they recorded some of the coldest temperatures ever seen Annas active. And so in 2016, they had 8 nights in a row with temperatures running to about, 1 degree Fahrenheit to, 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Daytime highs that stay below 23 degrees. And these birds are seen around healthy and active, as shown by that bird I caught in December, early December. Early January, they had 3 consecutive nights of -4 to -7 degrees Fahrenheit. These birds are active. Again, 40 days where the daytime high did not reach above freezing and color marked birds survived.
Go back to the poster. It sounds confusing, but maybe it's not, because insects make up a large part of their diet, and as hummingbirds can survive. So they're not surviving on nectar.
Not at all.
They're surviving on cleaning insects off.
Yeah, and that's another thing we're not really entirely sure about. But there was one, let's see, there's some controversy about our feeders, the ones that are responsible for Anna's expansion. There's been some discussion about eucalyptus globalus, the blue gum that was planted all along the California coast up there, that those are providing lots of food for Anna's. Todd and I, from what we've seen in Alaska, what we seem to believe, and we think this is true of the roofuses in the southeastern United States as well, is you build the baseball field and they will come. So you put out the feeders, the birds come to that, and you can see them. That doesn't mean that they weren't there already. So we have gotten sightings of Annas in very remote parts of Alaska and Kenai and the peninsula where there's no feeders out, and their birds are there. So we don't think that, we think that's just a supplemental thing, that totally taking advantage of it, but that's not what is pushing the population. I'm sure it's assisting it. But they can't survive on sugar water alone. So they're out there, they're gleaning, hibernating insects. There's these midges and other little flies that are active in the wintertime. They're picking bugs off the sapsucker wells and many other things that we just don't even understand yet. This one says one female was found to have 32 leafhoppers in her stomach at once. Which tells me that they found the female, they opened her up and she's trying to get rid of it or something.
How about Kodiak? Does Kodiak have rufus?
Mhm. But there's no banners in Kodiak, so I think Todd has gone over there once or twice, but yeah, I'll look at the door there. So these guys, Jessica Pollock started this research. She is now since retired, and another group of scientists have come up and have taken over this program now. But they were the first ones to write a paper on wintering Annas, and they also documented the first Anna's nest in Idaho as well. And they're my go-to for information. So I just thought that was a really cute picture I wanted to share with you of that one in Boise. And then this picture was sent to me last year by a guy who lives in Puget Sound. And he says about 200 Annas that keep him very busy.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just a small fraction, he says, of the feeders that he has there. So, here's some recent literature about the Annas. And one of the things that we've been talking about is this physiological response to high elevation. So it turns out Annas can take very low oxygen levels and still be active. So here's a bird that's got a huge high metabolic rate, yet it can go up from sea level to 7,000, 8,000 feet and not be bothered. So one of our trains of thought is these birds are probably here in the summer, but they're up in the high alpine meadows, and they're feeding up there. And then once snows come in, they start coming back down to the coast. Another paper here was talking about what we were talking about, urbanization and more feeders, and whether feeders are really pushing and enabling this expansion or not. And this paper also talks about that. I think I'm missing a slide. I am. So I'm going to go back to here. to talk about where these birds are coming from. So annas are extremely cold tolerant, and they nest very early in the year. So in Oregon, these birds in British Columbia are nesting February, March. Okay, so they raise babies in March. They're independent after 3 weeks. So by June, they're flying and they're bopping up the coast. So June, July 2nd, got an immature male in Cordova. So Todd says, no, this bird wasn't born here. He came up from British Columbia. That's where you're getting them. Now here's another really interesting fact about annas in Alaska. Annas in most of the lower 48 are migratory, but not in Alaska. They don't migrate. They think they migrate locally, which is really good because I wish I had found, I should have added that paper in there, I don't know where it is. But I found confirmation, another researcher believes what I do, that these birds are feeding at high altitude in the summer and coming down in the winter. Now, when I go down to Sedona in August to the Sedona Hummingbird Festival, we're right in the peak of migration. We're bathing 5 to 6 different species of hummingbirds, and they're all at the feeders at once. Rubises and annas and broadtails and flypeas and blackchins, all there and competing all at once. But here on the breeding range, even though annas are a bigger bird, the rubises are much more aggressive. So I think that's one of the reasons we don't see the annas on the feeders while the rubises are around. I think they're just like a more mellow, shy hummingbird, if that is possible to describe a hummingbird as mellow and shy. So they just kind of, and it was true with that bird. He came to the least active trap. All the other rubises were over at these 3 other traps, and he was going to the one that the least amount of birds were coming to.
So if you think they migrate to get to a certain size and they have northern latitude, why?
They just are, just like the rufus, we think especially the immature males just have this wanderlust about them. They just decide to go off and explore new territories for whatever reason. So they come up here and they're like, I like Cordova. I think I'll stay here. Well, in the case of Todd's bird, he likes Savannah until Todd caught him, and then he moved to Cordova, and then he said, damn, there's another one here. But he's still staying at the weather gate, so maybe he'll find a girlfriend come spring. So, it's been really interesting. Every year brings me one more hint, one more piece of the puzzle, one more temptation to go out there and find out more information. So if you'd like to keep a hummingbird feeder up in the winter, you can do a couple of different things. You can do what you guys do, pull it in at night, put it back out in the morning. You can also put up a heat lamp on it. The problem with the heat lamp, this one was up on the Lake Avenue porch, and it worked great until we had some good gusts of wind, and as soon as that cold sleet hit that bulb, it was shattered. So I don't know if there's other types of heat lamps that could possibly use that wouldn't have that problem, but that was the problem I had with that particular feeder. But that bird loved sitting on the feeder underneath that heat lamp. Really enjoyed that swan on it. And then I bought one of these, and I got the smaller version. This is the smaller version, and it's only like $35. Super easy. Regular nightlight bulb goes into it, and I change it once a week. This is a picture from somebody else. This is in Oregon, and there's a couple of different companies that sell these types of feeders, different versions of them. You could probably make one yourself. I mean, you could probably make one yourself. And it's just a little pinch clamp right here. So you can just pinch that, pull the bulb out, open the feeder, clean it, put it back together, put your bulb back in. Super easy to take care of, super simple to clean.
And I think a lot of locals have been innovative when they've noticed annas at the feeders over the past 15 years. And, just put a light bulb underneath one way or another.
I've seen people like set a raised platform with a heating pad and a feeder sitting on top of it. So I'd like to thank my banding hosts. Diane and JP have been terrific. They let me sit on their porch anytime, pretty much that I want to. She occasionally gives me food. And then Steve and Wendy, without these guys, I would not have half the data that I've gotten. And Andrew has graciously allowed me to put his porch as well. And so I've got a nice cross-section of Cordova now. So I'm at White Shed Road at my house, on the EF Drive on the edge of the Delta at Diane's, over here at the lake, and then out north of town at Orca. But I'm still always looking for new places to band, so if you think you've got a place that's conducive for me to setting up a trap and accessing a trap, and you've got birds, and you'd like me to come and give them shiny little bracelets, I'll be happy to try to work that out with you. And I'd like to also thank my funders who have supported me. In particular this year, my new supporters, United Design Company, they make these beautiful shirts for me. Also my board of directors, Dr. Jim Boone, who's actually a reptile and mouse guy. I've known him since my undergraduate days at the University of Georgia. He's been in Las Vegas for a long time. And of course, our wonderful Dr. Marian Bishop. Without those two, I would not have been able to publish a lot of my scientific paper writing, and they're really good at crossing my T's and dotting my I's. And she makes a great track. So, does anybody have any further questions? Yeah.
So you wonder how they spend the night. Where and what do they take advantage of so long?
Yeah, so again, they're lowering their body temperature and their metabolic rate down to 95%, which is pretty amazing to me that they could do that. They're finding a shelter spot deep in the trees, out of the wind, and they just kind of hang on, and then they shut the engines down, and they can do that for a couple of days. More than that, they got to refuel. Now,
Or they just find somebody's greenhouse that doesn't.
There you go. A lot of times, people will find hummingbirds that have been in torpor and have fallen out of their sheltered spot in a tree, by being blown out by a storm, and they think these birds are super distressed, and they are, because they are trying to warm up, and it takes a while to get that engine up, but they know they're not right, and they'll make little peeping distress calls. If that ever happens, just take the bird, put it in a little box or a little sheltered area, and just leave it alone. Just set it in a corner and give it an hour or two, and let it warm up its engines, and then it should just move and go on his way. You don't need to do anything else for him. If he's awake and he's not doing anything, then you potentially offer them some sugar water, 1 part sugar, 4 parts water. So you have a cup of water, you're putting a 1/4 cup of sugar in it. You don't need to boil it. You don't need to put any additives in it, just because pure cane sugar and water mixture is the closest thing you can come to real flower nectar. So don't mess with the formula. Don't give them honey. Don't give them sucrose, sativa, any of that stuff. Or stevia. That's what it's. Don't give them any sativa either.
We have a question online.
Yes.
What can we do to help the rufous hummingbirds in Southeast Alaska?
Stay away from pesticides. So, especially neonicotine pesticides seem to be really affecting these hummingbirds. It's a persistent organic chemical. They're picking it up, feeding on flowers and other areas that have been sprayed. They're picking it up by insects that also have been sprayed, and it's affecting them very hard. So stay away from that. Plant flowers that hummingbirds, native plants that hummingbirds can utilize.
Cats indoors.
And keep your cats indoors, exactly. Cats. I am a cat lover. I have a cat. She's an indoor cat now. She used to be an outdoor cat in Chenega, but she's been moved to Cordova. She's now an indoor cat. House cats are probably the #1 predator on songbirds in the United States. They do an incredible amount of decimation to birds in general. And other than that, support science. The Western Hummingbird Partnership is a great resource of both information and research, and a way to support banders like me all over the country support me. I'm a local 501c3 research and education nonprofit. I am not supported by any big funders. I am not part of any big organization. It's just me and whatever donations that I can get to keep me in equipment and gas money to get to the birds. Any other questions?
Yeah, fitting to what you were saying about, the physiology and the growth, I was just wondering, besides banding maybe, do you guys have any idea of the lifespan that could be?
So I know more about the rufous life expectancy than the Anna's, but I assume it's not too different. So the females usually have a longevity of about 8 to 10 years in the wild, and the males about 6 to 8 years in the wild, because the males are just running a lot more hot and they burn out sooner. In captivity, they can live, 12 years or potentially longer.
The question everyone wants to know is, where can we get one of those cool shirts, Kate?
My design company. Yeah, they would and I hope those guys are watching and that they would be tickled to death to hear that. And so what these guys are doing, they're a local design company. Let me choose the design again. They made this design for me. Ellie was the designer, and they are trying to link with a couple of other different small nonprofit organizations around the state, and they're going to give each of us a small percentage of the sales of this design. So go to KeyBagDesign.com and you can pick out a shirt. They've got a couple of different styles.
So, Kate, what's most recent thought on what the decline in rufus is?
Yeah, it's habitat destruction, it's fire, it's pesticides, and climate change.
So then the Annas, they don't share the same habitat.
Not necessarily. I think what the Annas have is a broader range to choose from, being able to go up in elevation, as well as I think the physiology is just tougher. But there's so many questions we don't really understand why this one species is doing so well, this other species is not. So these are all questions that we hope to discover what's doing it. In my opinion, I think one of the big things that's affecting Alaska birds is our babies. So we have a staggered migration for the rufus. The males leave about the beginning of July. The females will leave about 2 weeks later, so about mid-July. And then the babies leave following at the end of July. So they're not following mom and dad. And as they're going out of here, they're heading down the spine of the Rockies. They're coming down through British Columbia, down into Oregon, Washington, and then spreading out along the Colorado Rockies, Arizona. And what is happening down there in August for the past handful of years? We've got major forest fires going on. So these birds are flying right into places that are already burned, they're on fire, there's smoke all over the place.
It just makes it drought.
And major drought. And so we think all of this is affecting them heavily. And then with climate change, we've got asynchronous bloom and bud going on. So when the birds are coming up in the spring, usually we have a lot of snow on the ground and the alders and the willows are blooming. And there's gnats and stuff that are attracted to them. And the next thing we have all the blueberries coming up. So the blueberry bushes in particular are hugely important for the females. They're coming up right, again, they're staggering in, so the males show up first and the females right after them. And the last couple of years in particular, we've had these really late, heavy spring snows. And you can watch eBird. You see them coming up the coast, and then they just like catch a can, and it's like boom, and they're stopping because they can't. I mean, when they're coming up in the spring, they're following the coastline and that coastal bloom, right? So they're showing up here, and we still got 3 feet of snow sitting on top of the blueberry bushes, and then nothing else is blooming. So I think that is giving them a little bit of a hard time. Last couple of years, I've had the males and females show up almost on the exact same days. It's only been a couple of days apart. So they're like, their windows going like this. And then, right when the females are nesting, they're either incubating or they've got nestlings in the nest, we're getting huge out-of-season spring storms. Much more severe, much more heavy winds, heavy rains, and that's toasting a lot of young birds. So my recruitment, and this is hard to tell because you have to look at statistics with your, how much effort are you still going to catch birds, how many hours. But it really seems to me the last couple of years my recruitment has been pretty low. The number of immature birds I'm seeing in July hasn't been as significant as the birds I used to see, 10 years ago. So I think that is a factor of it as well. So these eras don't have that exact same natural history of timing. They're on the area. Once they get up here, they're here. And then they're either going up, high elevation and coming down, and they kind of, hop around locally, but they're not making these long migrations back and forth down to the lower 48 where the rufous are.
And so insects make up a much larger percentage of their diet too than rufous?
Well,
Or,
I think species to species, we don't know what, but I think it's probably relatively fairly the same. They need a certain amount of protein and they need a certain amount of fuel, right? Yes.
Just getting good about the back east and southeast of New England. Where do those rufuses and craftsovers hummingbird set up on the Rockies? They're going up into the northeast? Or
On the eastern seaboard, the primary species is the ruby throat. But we do have rufuses that are now, and my work helped figure this out, they are now wintering in southeastern United States. So that's Alabama, Florida, Georgia.
in New England, is there winter rain?
So this was a great part of my rufus research because it was, were they already there and nobody noticed them until hummingbirds and gardens and buckhead got really popular, and then, oh, look, there's birds here. Or did they all of a sudden decide, hey, we've had a couple of degrees of winter temperature change for the warmer, and why should I go all the way across the Gulf of Mexico to my winter range, which may or may not be there because of habitat destruction, when I can stay here in this beautiful bucket garden land. Right? So, but those birds, they're not doing a cross-country flight. They're coming down the Rockies, and then when they get to New Mexico, whatever, they're fanning out along the Texas coast, going across that way. So that's kind of my root spots.
Yeah.
So I've been invited once again. I think this is my 7th time I'll be presenting down at the International Hummingbird Festival in Sedona, Arizona at the end of July this year. So if anybody is down there and wants to come and see some of our banding demonstrations and see some amazing hummingbirds and some great lectures, and Sedona is a pretty cool place, even in the middle of the summer. That's where I'll be. Otherwise, come and find me this summer, either at Orca, or if you got some birds in your yard you'd like me to come look at, or you'd like to be a bathing assistant, give me a call. I will set you up. Thank you so much for attending.
thank you.
And don't forget about the great backyard bird kennel. So how many people are on that?